integral to religion, or exceptional and an offense to religion, or both, or all three? Violence and religion.
Okay, so I'm going to try to abbreviate this. There are two things to remember. First of all, most religious conflicts are not about religion. What you find is religions will fight when there's land, when there's power, when there's resources, when there's water, when there's money. It's very rare for a religious group, not inconceivable, but very rare for a religious group to say, hey, guess what? There's someone halfway across the world who believes differently, let's go get them. It's the people who live next door to us, who are other than us, we should get them, and by the way, along the way, we're going to take their land, and we're going to take their riches, and we're going to take this. And that's because, and if you look in the Encyclopedia of War, which is probably not something that you peruse in your leisure hours, but if you do, you will see that it identified 1,763 wars since the beginning of time. 123 of them are identified as religious wars. When you take religion out of a society, you don't get a more peaceful society. We look at the 20th century. It was like a laboratory for that. Stalinism, Maoism, Nazism, Cambodia, North Korea versus South Korea, on and on and on and on. The fact is, the record of extracting religion is very poor. And the final point is this, which is, if you ask why religious people fight, the answer is clear. It's because they're people. I have a colleague, not a rabbi, but a psychologist in Los Angeles who studies bullying. Do you know at what age bullying is most prominent? Think to yourself what age, and then I'll tell you the answer by far. The answer is preschool. Because we're not born all sweetness and light. It's why it's so much hard work to get a kid to be good. Right? Parents don't have to say to their child, why don't you share a little bit less? You know? Because you're too selfless. You're too kind. Instead, it's very hard work to get people to do well. What religions are known for is their attempt to make something straight of the crooked nature of human beings. And they fail again and again and again, exactly as you would expect if you know human nature. But that doesn't mean that the attempt to do it makes people worse. Quite the opposite, at least according to the evidence of history.
Well, violence, there's no mystery about violence. I mean, violence arises because we are primates, imperfectly evolved. Our prefrontal lobes are too small, our adrenaline glands are too big. There are various other deformities of this kind. Sexual organs designed by a committee, all the rest of it. And we're greedy, and
we're back to polytheism.
We're greedy and fearful, and covetous of other people's and also, surprisingly, it's probably our biggest defect, given that the reason we're so successful is there's almost no genetic difference between us. If we were dogs, we'd all be the same. Breed, there's fantastically little variation. But we're incredibly prone to tribalism and ethnic and racial, what Freud calls the narcissism of small differences. So, of course, if a tribe, let's say, that's calling itself the Children of Israel, for the sake of argument, decides that it should kill all the other tribes that get in its way, take their women as slaves, butcher their men, take their land, take their cattle, and so battle in this way across to Canaan and take everyone else's land and burn down there. That's going to happen whether there's a God or not, or whether there's religion or not, but it'll happen very much more intensely if they believe they have a mandate from heaven to do so. It's a terrific force multiplier. I think there would have been a quarrel between the Hutu and the Tutsi of Rwanda, say, once Belgian colonialism had established that there were these two different character groups, types, that is, the tribes. But it's a terrific force multiplier that the Catholic Church was as strong as it was in Rwanda, the most Christian country in Africa, made it infinitely worse. What makes the Israel-Palestine two-state solution ungettable? Because there's a chunk of people on both sides who say they have God in their corner and God gave only their group the land. And they can negate the votes of everybody else, including the whole of the international community, by the way, just because of their faith. Northern Ireland is the same. There would have been a Republican nationalist dispute. It's infinitely worse because of religion. So I think the corollary I'd like to hold would be that the less religion there was, the less violence there would be. But I can't in good Darwinian conscience say that. But I think the more that people refused orders that were divine, as, for example, to take the preposterous allegation that the rabbi makes that the wars of the 20th century were secular wars, the belt buckle worn by every soldier in the Nazi army that says, Gott mit uns, God on our side. I don't think that was a help to you. Things were bad enough as they were. On page 70, I think it is, of Mein Kampf, Hitler says that in taking on the filthy virus of Judaism, I know I'm doing the work of the Lord, and I'm summoned by the Lord to do this work. A book, one of the very few books the Vatican didn't ban in that period, by the way. I don't think that was a help either. So I'd say, on the whole, we'd be better off without the belief either in a supreme dictator, because that leads to violence, or the idea that God takes sides in our pathetic mammalian disputes.
I want to just, as a coda to this, when you say that we shouldn't take orders, I just want to remind you of a long history. For example, the abolition of slavery was almost entirely the work of people who believed they were taking orders from something higher than societal orders. Wilberforce in England, here, Beecher and John Brown and so on, they believed they were doing God's work by abolishing slavery. And it's interesting that the abolition of slavery was a Christian movement, but the idea is it's not an issue of who you take orders from. It's an issue of the orders you take. That's the issue. And it comes down in part to what kind of religion you practice, not whether you practice religion.
Comrades, I'm sorry.
Comrades, what kind of orders you take.
Brothers
That's what it comes down to.
Brothers and sisters.
That's better.
Comrades, friends. I suppose it is somewhat to the credit of some Christians that in the waning decades of thousands of years of slavery that were biblically mandated, some of them belatedly joined things like the American Anti-Slavery Society, stars of which were Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, non-believers, right? Whereas to the last day of the Confederacy, the flag of the Confederacy said Deo Vindice, God on our side. And every justification for that slavery came from the Bible, where indeed it's not hard to find.
We're going to take questions from the audience in about 1 minute. There are microphones. If you have questions, make your way, and we will take them very shortly. As we begin to do that, may I ask, Christopher Hitchens, you've debated Rabbi David Wolpe on this subject. You've debated the Reverend Al Sharpton.
Yes.
What's the difference between these debates?
Well, the Reverend Al Sharpton is another case of the damage done by to society by religion, because once it was agreed by the rest of America that black people are best led by preachers, and once it was agreed to write out of the civil rights record the heroic black secularists like Bayard Rustin and the great black union leader Philip Randolph, who actually organized with the help of the United Automobile Workers the March on Washington. Once all that had been forgotten, and we decide, yeah, black people, they really love their preachers, then once Dr. King has gone, it's one succession of junk demagogues after another, all of them given the mantle because they're in holy orders. There's no fraudulence you can't get away with in this country if you can get the word reverend put in front of your name.
Questions from the audience?
Sharpton's a very conspicuous example of that.
We'll begin right here. Madam, your question.
Sir.
Sir, I can't see. I'm sorry. The light.
Yeah.
Hedges, Hitchens,
Mr. Hedges.
Madam, sir.
Yeah, and they come there and beat you up.
see,
Man.
sorry.
Okay.
Later.
Okay. It seems to me that most religions deal with operational aspects of life, such as human capital development, that is the accumulation of literacy and technology, economic development, mental and physical well-being, and public service, which deals with charity and those kinds of things.
These are the work of religion, you're saying?
Yes, that they profess this, yes. And that all faiths profess these things, and since they do, it seems to me that it's not so much their profession that causes the negative externalities between people who profess these things, but it's the labels that they take hold, such as, I think Mr. Hitchens alluded to the fact that people say things about their faith that they actually don't practice or believe. And so I'm saying that should we just abandon these labels and stop calling ourselves Jews, Christians, or Muslims, or whatever, and deal with the operational facts of life, which deal with, again, human capital, literacy, economic development, mental and physical well-being, and public service and charity, helping others, without the labels.
Rabbi?
If I understand